Hey everyone, welcome back. This is part 2 in our brand new series in which I'm going to be building a Microsoft Fabric data platform for my business completely from scratch. And we're going to be exploring a lot of the recent advancements in AI and other tools like Ontologies and integrating DuckDB and DBT. We're going to be exploring lots of these different themes through this project. We went through this diagram in the last video. If you haven't watched part 1, then I definitely recommend you watch that one before this video because it will give you good context. In this video, what I want to do is, we're going to be setting up our project in Visual Studio Code, setting up BMAD, the method, the framework that's going to guide us through the development process. But before we kind of jump into that project setup area, I just want to spend 5 minutes, let's say, on understanding what the BMAD method is, because I think, without that context, it'll be quite difficult to follow where I'm going with this. And I'll introduce the BMAD method by telling a bit of a story, really, about my own learning journey over the last 6 months using Claude Code, and finally landing on the BMAD method as a really good tool for taming or mitigating some of the risks that can come with Claude Code. So let's jump straight in. I just want to start with a few assertions, okay? I'm not going to be teaching Claude Code complete basics here, so if you're not really familiar with what Claude is, or generative AI, or Claude Code, then probably recommend you watch another video on YouTube. There's millions of videos that teach that sort of thing, just to kind of get the basics. I'm going to be focusing on how we can apply Claude and Claude Code to Fabric data platform development and analytics, essentially, because that's probably where I can add the most value. I will start with a slight differentiation, just so we don't get confused. Claude is a series of generative AI models by a company called Anthropic. Claude Code is just the software that they've packaged up around that model to make it easy for us to interact with the model. And it's accessible, Claude Code, through the terminal on your laptop. Also, there's a VS Code extension. I'm mainly going to be using the terminal version. I can go into the reasons why, but there's pros and cons to both. When I talk about Opus 4.5, these are specific versions of the model. And the reason why I've pinpointed these is that, for me, 4.5, which was released around the end of November 2025, that is when I think we've crossed a bit of a chasm here. That's when it went from Gen AI is interesting to, okay, Gen AI is actually an incredibly useful tool that's probably going to change the industry in quite considerable ways. That was when I kind of realized that. And since November 2025, I've been building a lot, every single day pretty much, with Claude Code, Opus 4.5, and then Opus 4.6 when it came out. I've had a lot of really good results and some bad results. And if I was to try and summarize the learnings that I had throughout that period, well, this is probably how I would categorize it. So before November 2025, if you were to ask me how much can we rely on these models to produce genuinely useful and correct outputs from, like basic to medium prompting, I would probably say like 60% of the time, the results were good. But then 40% of the time, you had to really know what you were doing to be able to course correct the output or critically review the output and be like, no, that's not right. It's hallucinating. And at that level, it's not really good enough to use, right? Because it's more work to try and understand what it's done wrong than if you just write it yourself, probably. This was like pre-November 2025, before Opus 4.5. And what I noticed was that after November 2025, oh, and by the way, these are just like completely anecdotal. This is not, don't take these numbers. This is just trying to communicate my personal experiences with these models. This is 60%, 40%. This is just how I see it in my head, just from using these tools quite a lot. But what I noticed was that after 4.5, Opus 4.5 was released, I would say that number jumped up quite a lot. Okay, so now, even with basic to average prompting, it was getting you really good results about 80% of the time, which is a huge shift, right? Because then you're only really 20% of the time. Okay, it's not perfect by any means, but it's a lot better. And what I was finding is that, this is where, for me, it reached a bit of a tipping point. And I then said, okay, well, we're at roughly 80% in my head. What have we got to do to get it to in the 90s, 95%? So essentially what I did was analyze a lot of the prompts that I was giving it, analyzing where it was doing well, analyzing where it wasn't doing particularly well, specifically for like Fabric development. So creating notebooks and developing data pipelines and doing like Fabric development with these tools as well. And what I found was that, if you go from what I would call vibe coding, and vibe coding is essentially what I was meaning with this kind of basic prompting. It's where you're not really training the model on your own information. You're just saying, okay, write me a notebook that does this. The model doesn't have any context from your project. It doesn't have any context from anything really other than the training data that it's been given information on. And it depends on what you're asking it to do. If you're asking it to write a Python function that does some Spark transformation, it'll probably do pretty well with that because, it's probably got a lot of training data about Spark in its training corpus, these models. If you ask it to write a stored procedure in SQL, it would probably do pretty well. But what I was finding was that, especially with a lot of the things where it interfaces with Fabric, so it might require you to write data to a lakehouse, for example, it's going to struggle with those sorts of things. So what I basically landed on was this sandwich technique, I would call it. And the sandwich technique is what I think holds the key to getting really good, reliable results from these models and actually making them useful in a professional context. And I call it a sandwich because, you're kind of wrapping up your code generation with Gen AI between two layers. So before you do the code generation, you need to put in a lot of effort in terms of prepping the agent because the agent is only going to be as good as the context that you provide it. So that's when I started exploring the movement around like spec-driven development. We can talk about that a little bit more detail, but also just equipping the agent that you're using, like Claude Opus 4.5, with coding best practices that are specific for Fabric. So basically taking all of your knowledge in your brain that you have from developing Fabric projects in the past, how to write notebooks, how to interface with lakehouses, your styling preferences, how you like to interact with notebook utils, for example, how you like to interact with variable libraries or Azure Key Vaults, and just providing it with really short, focused expertise about this is the way to do this in Fabric. Now, obviously, if you don't have that knowledge, it's going to be a bit more difficult. But what I've noticed is that when you provide an agent with all these little snippets of like best practices, it does a much, much better job. The specification is slightly different to that. It's more about your agent understanding the context of your project and allowing it to make good decisions based on what are the hard things that this asset that you're developing need to adhere to. So that's like the first layer. This is everything you need to do before prompting your agent to create something, right? Then obviously the code generation or whatever you're generating could be a visual, could be a notebook, could be a pipeline, whatever it is. Afterwards, we need to get a lot better at testing and validation. Now, this was the case before AI and LLMs, but the importance of testing and validation has just gone up tenfold, in my opinion, because like it or not, there is going to be a lot more AI generated code. And for me, the testing and validation is that safety blanket that protects your infrastructure given of any changes that are made to it over time. And it's not just when you're generating new code, it's hopefully you're going to tie these into continuous integration tests so that every time you push changes, we're always running tests on the most important things in our infrastructure to make sure that there's no regressions in terms of the quality. Okay. So when we sandwich our generative AI outputs with specs at the top before and best practices and expert guidance and testing and validation of the output, and that is both the testing of the code, like unit testing, integration testing, but also testing of the data as well through things like data validation and these sorts of things. This combination is really, really powerful. And what I noticed was that applying this kind of sandwich approach with these really, really high-powered latest models like Opus 4.5 and 4.6, what I was finding is that the outputs just became insane, like up to 95%. And it was right about most things. And the outputs became so useful that Yes, you would still have to review it, obviously, but I could rely on it a lot more because I know it's going to be using my coding best practices. I've trained it in all of the Fabric nuances as well, because like I mentioned, these tools are probably great at writing Spark code, but they're probably not trained on much Fabric notebook code. So anytime you've got to integrate with the Fabric runtime, like notebook utils, as I mentioned, variable libraries, or tools like Fabric CI/CD maybe, where they're very new and they probably haven't got much of that in the training data. You just need to provide them with good examples of how to structure your code and how to tackle problems, and you get really, really good results. So I'd say once you've done that, yeah, you get very good results. And it was at that point where I was like, well, yeah, this is going to completely change how I think about developing projects. So then the question became, okay, so you've got that sandwich technique. How do we actually get that structure? Well, boiling it down to a few different things. Number one is spec-driven development. Number two is encoding those best practices, and getting LLM guidance documents, essentially, and then building a proper testing and validation framework. So spec-driven development is a phrase that you might have come across if you're into this sort of stuff. You might have heard of, there's things like OpenSpec and SpecKit, which is a GitHub project. I explored both of these, and whilst they're good for creating specifications, they're definitely a big improvement on, for example, plan mode. So plan mode is definitely better than nothing. And plan mode is where you can set in Opus 4.5, 4.6, you can say, okay, I want to just plan this out a bit. So this is like a good start because you're saying we're not going to jump straight into the build. I want you to think about this a little bit. So it's moving in the right direction if you're using plan mode, but in my experience, it's not good enough. So that's why I started to explore these other tools. And OpenSpec and SpecKit, as I mentioned, they're okay. The issue I was finding with those, and I've tried these all out, is that you don't get much assistance in writing the spec. And what I found is that it can lead to people just generating specs with AI, which is probably not really what you want to be doing. You want to have a lot of your own insights into that spec. You can generate a spec with AI and then go through it and review it and update it. And then I stumbled across this BMAD method. I think they've kind of updated the acronym here, but it used to be called the Breakthrough Method for Agile AI-Driven Development. And whilst it's probably not just a specification tool, it in fact does way more than that. It's essentially a whole framework for how to approach AI-driven development projects. But an output of this process is really detailed specifications and briefs and documentation that you then feed into your agent, and it drastically improves the output. So I kind of stumbled across this and I started using it for planning in my business, not building a Fabric platform. So this is the first time I'm going to be building a Fabric platform with this method, but I just love the way that it works. And we'll go through why I like it a lot in this video, and we're going to be setting it up in this video as well. So as I mentioned, it contains a suite of tools, this BMAD method, to elicit requirements. So you're not just creating a specification, but you can spend hours brainstorming what's important to you. They use like an agent in Claude Code, and they've designed it in quite a clever way where it essentially coaches you or acts as a consultant on an engagement. So it asks very probing questions and it forces you to think in different ways. And you obviously give it feedback and you answer the questions as best you can. And there's a lot of different brainstorming tools. That's why I use this word elicit, like to extract what's happening in your brain onto a piece of paper so that these can be documented in the brief and the requirements and the specifications that your project uses. Like I mentioned, it does a lot more than that. It also is essentially a agile development tool. So once you've done your briefing and you've got your requirements and your specifications extracted from your brain onto some paper, it also helps you implement an agile process in terms of encoding best practices. A few tips on this one. There's no real shortcuts for this. You just need to sit down and document all the development best practices that you've got, and specifically the gotchas for whatever it is that you want your AI model to generate for you. Now you can, if you've got a well-developed Fabric project already, like with notebooks that you're happy with, you can just give it that as like input and get it to extract your practices out of that code base, for example. So that's one way of doing it, and document them so that on future projects, it can get straight to the point very easily. What I would say is think about what the model has been trained on. So these are general purpose models. They've been trained on massive amounts of text. Claude Code specifically has been trained for coding. That's its specialism. So probably like the whole of Stack Overflow, like GitHub, all of this sort of thing it's going to be trained on. But what it probably has seen less in its training phase is, like I mentioned, the Fabric specific code. So how it interacts with notebook utils, variable libraries, the Fabric CI/CD stuff, how to write to a lakehouse using ABFS paths, for example. Also writing niche JSON objects, for example, like Deneb visuals in Power BI, or even writing Fabric item definitions. These are quite niche tasks, and you need to essentially give your model a round of fine-tuning through exposing it to lots of these examples and getting it to document what it's learning, essentially. The third thing that we need if we're going to implement this sandwich method is proper testing and validation. And BMAD also has a tool that can help you develop a testing architecture. Now, BMAD itself is not really designed explicitly for Microsoft Fabric projects, but it's flexible enough that we can apply it to that use case. And you can use an agile development process to develop Fabric platforms and Fabric like analytics. So I am more than confident that we'll be able to kind of like bend it a little bit to this particular task. So what is BMAD and how does it help us? Well, just copying from the docs here, the BMAD method, this is what the new name is. So build more architects' dreams. It's a bit more fancy, but essentially it's an AI-driven development framework within their own ecosystem that helps you build software through the whole process, from ideation and planning through to agentic implementation. It doesn't have to be fully agentic either, obviously. You're still in control. This is at the end of their VS Code project. So you get AI agentic assistance, but there still might be tasks where you want to add your human input to as well. So you can do that. That's completely fine. It provides specialized AI agents, guided workflows, and intelligent planning that adapts to your project's complexity, whether you're fixing a bug or building an enterprise platform. And this is essentially what it is. It's just a series of agents and workflows and planning tools. If you've used Claude Code, you're probably familiar with agents and how they work, and also skills. So essentially bundles up a load of really useful agent and skills and puts them in a framework that has been battle tested. It's got like 40,000 stars on GitHub. What I was finding that as I was kind of building my own skills and my own agents in a Visual Studio Code project, but you're not really following best practices because you don't really know what best practices are, or most people don't, in terms of how to design or prompt your agent or how to write a really good skill. This we can just lift off the shelf and use the combined insights from enterprise, academia, 40,000 GitHub stars. It's a big open source project. It's on version 6, so it's gone through quite a few iterations. I really like this diagram because it explains quite well all of the different elements of BMAD, and it helps you work to a particular workflow, okay? And they call it context engineering for AI-powered development. So this is so important, and it kind of, as soon as I saw that, I thought, oh, this is going to be useful because it's doing or helping us with at least all of these, and also this, a separate module as well. But as I mentioned, this sandwich thing is essentially context engineering and context management. And so to have a tool that helps us with that is really, really helpful. There are 4 phases, let's say, to a typical BMAD implementation. We'll start off with the analysis phase. And we have an agent here, which is a business analyst agent. And the agents here are essentially just, they give them roles and personalities and they think through the lens of an analyst. And it's just to help you to bounce ideas off someone who's wearing that business analyst hat. these are the workflows in the analysis phase. So you can use it to brainstorm. And there's over 50 brainstorming techniques that, again, come from essentially prompting best practices, either from academia or from prompting and AI competitions. So we can have a look at some of those later in the video, and we can use it to extract stuff from your brain. That's the whole purpose of this analysis phase, and get it down onto paper so that your requirements are properly documented and people, or essentially the agents a bit further down the line, are all singing off the same hymn sheet. We're going to be doing this phase in this video a little bit later on. So the output is going to be the product brief. So we're going to be doing a bit of brainstorming, and then we're going to be using that to write our product brief. The next phase is the planning phase, and we have a few different workflows that we can trigger here. This one is the main one. So essentially, we're going to be using our outputs from the analysis phase here, and we're going to be this time calling on our product management agent, and we're going to be working in collaboration with John. They give them all names, which I quite like. We're going to be working with John to create our project requirements document. Now, this is going to outline absolutely all of our user stories, or at least the initial ones, right? We can always update it, but getting the main requirements for the project down on paper. Functional requirements, non-functional requirements, that sort of thing as well. Now, we also have a UX designer here. So I am going to be including this because I do want to focus on front end and analytics and like the agentic experiences for business users as well. I won't be doing that in this video though. That's going to be a separate one. Once you've got a plan and a PRD in place, that's when you move into the solutioning phase. So solutioning includes writing or creating your architecture. And these are just the main workflows that exist within the BMAD method. There is actually more. So within architecture, you can run like research projects to understand the best tools for the job at the architectural phase. So we're going to be doing a lot of that in this project as well. We have our product manager here, who's essentially going to take our architecture and our PRD and break them down into epics and stories. Then we're going to check implementation readiness, which is essentially going to take a look at what we need to do to start development here. So that's when we're going to start to provision, in our case, things like fabric capacities, set up security groups, set up Azure Key Vault, set up a lot of the supporting infrastructure so that by the time we get to implementation, we're ready to go. The implementation phase, you can do sprint planning, creating stories, developer stories, and then doing actual development as well, and then reviewing the output. There's a few others, but those are the main ones. I would probably highlight this thing at the bottom because it's really, really important. Each document that we produce here becomes the context for the next phase. So create story, it loads the epics, the PRD, the architecture, the UX. Dev story loads the story file. Code review loads the architecture and the story. Quick dev loads the tech and the spec. From like the product brief down here, we're going to be passing that into our create PRD. Once we've got a PRD, we're going to be using that for the architecture. So this is how it's like a really nice framework that helps us manage the context. And so making sure that our agents all the way through the project have the right information that they need to make good decisions. Now, obviously, we're still involved in this, right? So we're getting assistance with creating a PRD, but it's very, very important to actually put in the work and review these documents, update them, edit them, make sure that they meet your requirements. Because at the end of the day, especially in this early phase, it's very, very important that you get your requirements right and they are an accurate reflection of what you're trying to build. Otherwise, obviously, they'll build the wrong thing. And it's a lot more difficult to make changes retrospectively rather than just sitting down and writing or analyzing the plans and the briefs and the requirements that we're producing here. As a result of that, the BMAD method is not as quick as vibe coding. So it's not a quick process. I'm not going to lie to you. This can take days and probably weeks if you do it properly. These phases here, similarly to a traditional project, if you're doing it right, you're not just going to rush, hopefully, straight into building your epics and your stories and doing development and creating your architecture. It's always a good idea to think deeply at the beginning of a project, plan it out, understand the requirements in depth before you start writing lines of code. And nothing's different in this way of working as well. Now, because of that, it is a heavier tool. And what I mean by that is, if you're just using generative AI for a little side project, the BMAD method is probably not the right tool for you. But because I'm building a platform for my business and it's a fairly lengthy, it's going to be a decent sized project here, I do think the structure of this tool is going to help us. All right, that's enough talking. Let's get set up in Visual Studio Code. And hopefully all of these concepts will become a lot more concrete. All right, so here I am in Visual Studio Code. And when I said that we're going to be starting this Fabric project from scratch, this is exactly what I mean. We're going to make a new directory here in one of my local folders. And we're just going to call this Fabric BMAD. We'll just cd into that one. And we'll just open up that in a new Visual Studio Code. All right, so we've got a completely empty folder here on my local machine. And in this folder, we are going to be initializing the BMAD project. If I just head over to the GitHub here, so they do actually have a documentation page as well. I can leave a link in the description. You can go and find that there or just Google it. It's be the top result there. But you can find the installation instructions. It's very, very simple to get going. You do need Node.js installed on your machine because it uses npm npx. So we can just copy this npx bmad install. So I'm going to paste that in my Visual Studio Code. And if you're not familiar with npx, it's just a variation on npm that just essentially helps you kickstart a project. All right. And this is what we get. So we've got the BMAD logo up top here. And V6 is here. So we're using V6 of the BMAD method. And there's a bit of a installation guide that is going to walk you through. And what I'm going to do is, I've already created my directory. So I'm just going to put it in this directory. Install to this directory, yes. Now there's a few different modules, as they're known, that we can install here. The core module, you have to do that one. We're going to be using this BMAD method. That's kind of like the main one. And we'll talk through what that is when we install it. I just want to make a small point here about the BMAD builder. Now, I'm not going to be installing this, but this is, I think, new for V6. Essentially, it allows you to create your own modules with defining your own agents and your own workflows. Now, I have actually tried this, and it's a lot of work to get right. Personally, I would probably recommend, if you're just exploring it, to use the tried and tested BMAD method agile AI driven development, because there's a lot of work that's being put into that particular module, this one here. So I'd recommend using that one. Otherwise, you're having to essentially recreate a lot of that knowledge and experience from scratch, which is difficult and it takes a long time. So I don't recommend necessarily, you can try it, but it would take a while to get right. I'm also going to install the Test Architect module. Test Architect is really, really cool. It essentially is like having a really, really experienced test architect, funnily enough, who can help you design an enterprise testing strategy for your platform or your app or whatever you're building with the BMAD method. So I'm going to have these three ticked, and you can just do a space bar and then to kind of like scroll through the ones that you want and then enter when you're happy with your selection. I'm going to click no for custom modules and agents and workflows. Now I'm going to be using Claude Code in Visual Studio Code, and that's going to be my IDE for this project. But they do support a lot of other models and IDEs. Here, you can just scroll down to the bottom to find the one that you're familiar with or you want to use. There's no option for VS Code. It's kind of like assumed, I guess. You don't have to select it though. What should your agent call you? Will. I mean, obviously write your own name there. English. output files, I'm just going to go through the Express setup here. We can talk about the folder structure after it's fully installed and give you a bit of a lowdown of how the folder structure works. All right, so now we have our BMAD modules installed. Let's just go on a little bit of a guided tour here. So we've got 4 main folders that have been created in our Fabric BMAD folder. Got the BMAD. This is where we have all of our BMAD modules. Config, memory, BMM, which is probably the main one that you're going to be using the most. That's like the BMAD method. And it contains all of our agents here. So you'll see that it already comes packed with an analyst, architect, developer, product manager, QA, Scrum Master, UX designer, agents. And these are actually really detailed prompts. You can kind of like go through, understand how they are written. Probably wouldn't recommend changing these unless you really know what you're doing, because I would say they're probably like hyper optimized. Within there, as well as the agents, we've also got a lot of the workflows. So here you can see we've got the analysis workflow, the planning workflow, the solutioning, and the implementation, and some of the other ones like generating project context and end-to-end testing and things like that. So following on from the BMM module, I'm going to focus on the core module here. So core is essentially a load of tools that we can use in any of the other workflows with any of the other agents. And specifically, it's going to be these ones. So brainstorming, advanced elicitation, and party mode. We're going to be using each of these quite a lot in this project because the elicitation is, again, kind of like a tool and a technique to try and extract everything that you know or want to deliver in a project out of you. Not just on the project, but you can use it as you're going through your development process as well. We also have TEA. So this is the Testing Enterprise Architect. So we're going to be using this when we come to design our testing and validation architecture. And yeah, that's very, very powerful. And we'll get to that when we get to it. BMAD Output is like artifacts and outputs from the process, but ones that are mainly for you. So not for our agent necessarily. When we produce documentation that we want the agent to reference or agents to reference, they'll go in this docs folder. So these are a bit more polished and mainly for consumption by our agent, whereas the BMAD output is like artifacts from the process itself that we might not want our agent to include in their own context. And then obviously in terms of Claude, hopefully if you've been using Claude, you're familiar with the .claude file, but the BMAD method pre-populates it with all of these different commands that we can tap into as we're developing our project. So we're going to have access to all our agents here, and we also got all of the workflows for all of those agents as well, creating the PRD, creating epics, all of this sort of stuff. And yeah, as I mentioned, this would take so long to develop yourself. And it provides such a good structure for any type of project, really, but especially like software. And what we do in the world of Fabric is essentially a software project if you design it in the right way. If you choose your items carefully so that you choose things that are composable with code and testable, more importantly, as well. Okay, so that's enough of a tour. Let's kick this thing off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up Claude Code in my terminal window here. I'm using Opus 4.6 here. You could probably get away with using a lower powered model for some of the tasks. It depends on what you're doing at the time. But yeah, I would recommend probably sticking to Opus 4.5, especially when you're in that, like designing the architecture, designing the testing strategy, reviewing code, implementing the coding as well. I recommend having a high-powered model for that. So the first thing to bear in mind is we can do the slash commands like you can in traditional Claude Code. Probably the first one that we're going to have a look at is that BMAD help. So you can use this and interact with it. It's kind of like interactive documentation. So we can say, for example, hi there, I've never done a BMAD project before. Where do you suggest I get started? So we can just type in things like this, and what it's going to do is understand. It's got its own like helper documentation built into it, and you can use this to interact with it and understand, okay, what should I be doing now? So if you ever get stuck and you don't really know what to do, it's a really helpful tool. All right, we've got a response. Welcome, Will. Great to have you starting your first BMAD project. So it understands that there are a few different phases to the BMM module. We've got the analysis phase. We're going to research the domain, the market, or technology, and then crystallize our product idea into a brief. So you can see that it's kind of written through the lens of a software development, software product like life cycle, but these concepts are all definitely transferable to what we do with Microsoft Fabric. The planning phase and then the solutioning phase. So this is like the diagram I showed you, like this one here, essentially. It's just going through, saying, the analysis, the planning, the solutioning, and the implementation. These are the 4 phases that you need to be aware of. Where to start? Phase 1 is entirely optional, but recommended if you're still shaping your idea. Within phase 1, what we can do is do brainstorming. We can do market research, domain research, or technical research. We can also then create a brief. So I'm going to start here with brainstorming the project because I've got a lot of ideas, but they're not really structured and they're definitely not written down on paper. I mean, in the first video, I showed you this. So this is pretty much about all I have, plus my thinking around the technology choices and the types of development workflows that I want to implement on this project. But what I want to do is solidify that, and hopefully it can elicit all of these ideas that I have and put some structure around them. Then what we're probably going to do is create a brief document, which will, I don't think market research, domain and technical research, but hopefully we can get through brainstorming the project, technical research, creating the brief, and also creating the PRD in this video. So it might be quite a long one. But it's going to be very fun, I can guarantee you that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear the Claude context. So anytime I start a new bit of work in Claude, really, but especially with the BMAD method, I'm going to clear the context with the /clear command, just so that we've got a fresh slate, fresh context to work from. So what I'm going to do is BMAD agent, and we're going to just call that command, and hopefully it'll bring up the help command for this particular analyst, which I think is Mary. And Mary's going to tell us all the different things that she can help us with. And the business analyst is very useful for the beginning of a project because they've got a lot of built-in workflows, as we've seen, for like brainstorming and research and that sort of thing. Hi, Will. Welcome aboard. I'm Mary, business analyst. Let me tell you, I'm thrilled to dig into whatever challenge you've got brewing today, whether you're hunting for market patterns. Yeah. Whatever. Hi there, Mary. I want to start a brand new project. I'm going to be building a Microsoft Fabric data platform for my business. And I have a lot of ideas about what I want to achieve with this project, but I need some help eliciting these ideas. And I want to go through a brainstorming project to try to solidify the ideas and get some structure around them. Can you help with that? Absolutely. This is the kind of treasure hunt I live for. Mining all those brilliant ideas out of your brain, turning them into something structured and actionable. All right, we're going to be creating some output folders for the brainstorming session. Good to hear Mary's fired up, ready to facilitate some brainstorming. So this is going to be a discovery. We're going to mine every gem of an idea, context loaded. Got your project context framework ready, covering everything from user problems to pain points to technical approaches, business value and success metrics, perfect lens for Microsoft Fabric data platform in education. Let's set up your session for maximum creativity and productivity. Session discovery questions. All right. So it's going to provide you with some talking points, and you just want to discuss with it everything that you're thinking about. You don't necessarily have to hit all the questions. Sometimes they give you like 10 questions and you just obviously, the more information you give it, the more information it has to make something valuable. But I'm going to start with this first one. So we're brainstorming about this brand new Microsoft Fabric data platform that I want to build. So as I mentioned, I have an educational business. I run a YouTube channel and I have some school communities. And in the school communities, people pay to learn Fabric data engineering and Fabric AI through structured training programs and live sessions and that sort of thing. Given that I teach Microsoft Fabric, I should probably practice what I preach about. And I realized I don't have a Microsoft Fabric data platform for my business. But I realized that's a big opportunity because currently I'm not making decisions based on data to help drive my business forward. So that's a huge opportunity for me that I want to unlock with this project. What I've realized is that the North Star for this project is to really maximize the impact of my business. I think I can do that by creating better content, better education, right? Becoming a better educator myself, and having more successful member outcomes for the members in my communities, and having more members, more viewers on YouTube, that sort of thing is going to make more impact. I also have some principles for the project that I'd like to instill or follow. I want to explore the full potential of the very latest advancements in technologies and processes in Microsoft Fabric and in the wider technology like AI ecosystem. Principle 2, thinking, designing, and building from first principles. I believe what is required is a wholesale reassessment of the ways of working and the best practices from our industry, given that there's been so much technological change over the last few months. Principle 3, I want it to be evidence-based at every turn. So in this project, we're going to be doing a lot of testing of ideas and feasibility up front in this analysis and in the planning phase. So bear that in mind. I've got a lot of ideas, but I want to make sure they're feasible before we start the project as well. So, quite a big prompt. We'll see what Mary makes of that. This is magnificent! I can already see the layers of richness here. Beautifully meta. So she's a bit key, Mary, but Fabric educator building, not practicing what they preach. Living case study, let me play back. Primary goals is to unlock data-driven decision-making to maximize business impact across multiple dimensions, better content, better education. The why now, currently making decisions without data. It's a massive untapped opportunity. We're going to be doing a bit of first principles thinking, and there are actually tools built into the BMAD method to help with that as well, so we will tap into some of those. Evidence-based rigor. We're going to be doing a lot of testing and feasibility up front during the analysis and planning. Ideas are great, but they need to be validated before committing. Got it. School. That's an important distinction. School as a specific platform you're running your paid communities on. Noted and locked in. Oh, I love this so much. Ready to explore technique approaches. Okay, so what it's asking is within the BMAD method, I'll try and find the actual, it'll be within the core module actually. Within workflows, advanced elicitation, methods, you can see that built into the BMAD method, these are all the different methods that it has for advanced elicitation, as it calls it. So there's things like the stakeholder roundtable, expert panel review, debate club showdown, time traveler council, cross-functional war room. Now these all have funny names, but essentially they create environments to help you test and extract your ideas and make you think in different ways that you would never probably think of on your own. Like I mentioned, these are built from prompting best practices to really get the most out of agentic output. So this is like research-backed stuff, a lot of these, and winners of prompting, AI prompting competitions, these sorts of methods as well. For example, architecture decision records is a really, really powerful one. Code review gauntlet is another one that's really, really good. There's just so many, and we'll go through some of them, like Chaos Monkey, if you're familiar with that approach, that book as well. For now, let's go back to Mary. We're going to do some progressive technique flow. So we're going to start broad, and then we're going to systematically narrow our focus. All right, love it, Will. Progressive technique flow is the perfect choice for what you're describing. You've got a head full of ideas, and we're going to systematically extract them, organize them, refine them, turn them into something actionable. So it's a bit like exploration, exploitation type methodology. Expansive exploration, divergent thinking, moving into analytical thinking, and then convergent thinking, and then implementation focused. So this looks like the sort of thing that I'm after. So it's familiar with all of these techniques, and it's basically said, okay, what you need is giving us these ones. that we're going to start with. So let's just begin this process with continue. Now, I will warn you, this will probably take a long time. I'm not going to show you absolutely all of it because you'll probably get bored. But what I'll do is I'll check in at periods throughout. I'll probably show you a bit of this first one just to show you what it's like working in collaboration with these brainstorming techniques, these brainstorming agents. But then I won't show you all of it because it will probably take a few hours to go through just the brainstorming part, to be honest. All right, so we're going to start phase one, expansive exploration, mind mapping. I'm facilitating this as your creative partner, not just firing questions at you. We're going to explore together, build on each other's ideas, and follow the energy wherever it leads. You're in control. Say next technique at any time, and we'll move on. So, branch every idea outward from the central concept of your Fabric data platform. Energy expansive, free-flowing, no idea too small or too wild. Let's start with the first branch, data sources. So the main data sources for my business are going to be the YouTube analytics, the school community analytics as well. I also use the Vimeo platform to host a lot of my videos in the school community so I can get metrics about how much each video is being used, being watched. Currently, I don't run any advertising, but I might think about it in the future. So the Google Ads platform would be another data source, although that's not functioning properly yet. I make some posts on LinkedIn, so that could potentially be another data source. I make posts once every 6 months on LinkedIn. Those are the main ones that I want to start with. Also, GitHub. I have quite a few development projects on GitHub, so that might potentially be a data source as well. All right, excellent start. Already see the branches forming. Let me capture what you've laid out and then dig deeper because I have a feeling there's more gold hiding in the cracks. I think, to be honest, that's most of it. It's a very simple business. There's not many moving parts, which I think is a good thing. All right, now we're getting into... I was getting a bit worried there that we're just going to talk about data sources, which isn't really the crux of the matter, at least at this stage. We're going to talk about use cases and decisions. Awesome. You said something early that really struck me. You're not making decisions based on data. That tells me you are making decisions just on gut feeling, intuition right now. What decisions do you make regularly in your business that you wish you had better information for? Yeah, great question. So the main decisions that I make are what to make content on YouTube about, how to present that content, as in how to structure a video, how to attract users to my paid communities, and writing things like the copy for the about page on school, which is what people see before they sign up. Other key decisions are designing the roadmap for the communities that I manage. So what tutorials and projects and lessons I will be delivering over the next few weeks and months in each community. And also, again, how to structure that content, which is slightly different to the YouTube content. In my paid communities, ultimately, I'm interested in my members becoming as successful as possible and learning as best possible. So I do think a lot about what I include and what I don't include and how I teach things and how I don't teach things, if you get what I mean. This is especially the case now because the technology landscape is moving quite quickly. So always keeping content as up to date as possible is one of the main factors in what I do. All right, so got something back from Mary. I can feel the threads coming together. Actually, a content strategy engine powered by data. Decisions you're making are the exact ones that data could supercharge. Yeah, so not just content, but we've got a few use cases here. YouTube video structure and presentation. YouTube retention curves could literally show you minute by minute where teaching lands and where it doesn't. Community attraction conversion. Community content roadmap design. Community structure, content structure. Member success optimization. I like that. Content currency and relevance. Very good. Now that last one you said about what to include and what not to include, that's a fascinating tension. Let me pull on that thread a bit. You're essentially solving a curriculum design problem at speed, and you're doing it with two very different audiences simultaneously, broad and school. This makes me curious about a couple of branches we haven't touched yet. Let me throw 2 out and tell me which one your brains wants to chase. Sure, we can start with the audience. So, as you mentioned, the audience on YouTube is quite broad. I would probably say they are geographically spread out across the world, the Americas, in Europe, in Asia, Australia, Australasia. Mainly, I would say in the US, the UK, and India are probably the top 3. They cover quite a broad range of roles as well, because the channel is just Learn Microsoft Fabric with Will is the name of the channel. Now, up until this point, I've been focusing mainly on data engineering and data architecture on the channel and analytics engineering, because Microsoft Fabric is or was a relatively new platform. And a lot of the focus was on setting it up, building your platform in the right way, making sure you have the right foundations. But now there's a lot of interest in AI and agentic experiences. So I have a school community specifically dedicated to helping people develop workflows with Fabric AI tools and tools outside of Fabric that are AI as well. The other paid community I have on school is a focus on data engineering. So it's people that want to build the platform, the Fabric platform themselves in their own organization or in other organizations. The journey, I would say most people find me from my YouTube videos. There's a lot of content on there that I offer for free, and I help people get certified throughout those videos as well. And those videos are done really well. So there's quite a lot of traffic that gets generated. I get about 1 million views a year, let's say. And so from the people that have a good experience on YouTube and want to go deeper with my learning, my teaching, then they'll sign up to one of my school communities where they get a lot of exclusive videos. The focus really is on hands-on learning in both of those communities, and live sessions as well that I think are really important, and community interactions with a lot of the members as well. All right, this is a goldmine of context. Pictures starting to crystallize. I can see the whole ecosystem taking shape. Let me map this branch out. YouTube viewers, global and broad, geographically distributed, broad range of roles, finding Will through search and discovery, 1 million views per year. Top of funnel engine, massive reach, diverse audience. Data here could reveal which segments convert to paid versus which consume free. School community for data engineering. Paid members focus on building Fabric platforms in their own or client organizations. Hands-on learning, videos, live sessions, community interaction. These are builders. Their success metric is likely, did they actually build a working platform, which is measurable in ways traditional education doesn't track. The other school community for Fabric AI. Paid members focus on developing workflows with Fabric AI tools and broader AI ecosystem. Newer community riding the wave of AI interest. This is where the growth energy probably is right now, AI hot topic. All right, so now we've moved into the another kind of like branch of this method around capabilities and features, and I just wanted to record a little bit here. I've done about 4 or 5. We've captured 25 ideas so far. It's taken a bit of a while. We've done data sources, use cases, audiences, metrics, that sort of thing. But I think this one will be quite interesting. When building this platform, I want to use it as a showcase of the latest and greatest features in Microsoft Fabric and in the wider AI ecosystem. There's been a lot of advancements over the last 3 months that I think could fundamentally change how we think about building data platforms and using data platforms in our organizations. So I want to use this project as a chance to research these ideas, think deeply about how they can be applied to data platforms, and use it as a bit of a lighthouse project that I can share with my audience as well on YouTube, because I am actually recording everything we're doing here and I'm going to be sharing it with them, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in terms of AI-driven Fabric development. So that's the basis of this project. Crucially, I've noticed a few trends in the industry that I'd like to explore in more detail. Number one is a shift towards a more local development pattern using Visual Studio Code to develop new assets in Fabric where possible. And this is leading to a bit of a shift in how we develop Fabric items and what Fabric items we develop. Because ultimately, this shift is happening because in VS Code, we can access AI coding assistants like Claude Code. And if you do it right, you can build an architecture that is more testable. So these two in combination are a really, really powerful combination that I want to explore in this project in a lot more detail. I know that it's possible to build an architecture which includes tools like DuckDB and DBT, which have the advantages of being able to be developed completely offline with some limitations. By offline, I mean like with outside of the Fabric platform, let's say, and then they can be fully tested. It's a closed loop. And once they are fully tested, you can then deploy them into Fabric. So these are the types of ways of thinking that I'm going to be developing. And I'm doing everything in BMAD as well, as you've probably noticed by now, which is another kind of shift in how we think about developing these sorts of platforms. Will, you just blew this wide open. It's no longer just a platform for your business. It's a triple threat. Let me capture the magnitude of what you're describing. Capability 1, the lighthouse, the research living case study, showcase of the cutting edge Fabric development that Will documents and shares with his audience. The platform is the product and the content and the learning vehicle simultaneously. Every architectural decision becomes a teaching moment. This is meta in the best possible way. Oh, thanks. Got the approval of Mary for this series, which is good. VS Code local development pattern, shifting Fabric development from browser-based to VS Code local development, enabling AI coding assistants, GitHub Copilot, Claude Code, and more testable architectures. This is a fundamental paradigm shift in how Fabric assets are developed. I believe so. Moving from ClickOps to code first, unlocking the entire modern developer toolchain. AI-assisted Fabric development, leveraging GitHub Copilot and AI coding tools within VS Code. Testable architecture, very important. DuckDB and DBT. Closed loop architecture that can be developed and fully tested offline and then deployed into Fabric once validated. This solves one of the biggest pain points in data platform development, the inability to test properly. Also, the BMAD-driven development for the entire project lifecycle demonstrated this AI-assisted project methodology. Triple threat. I know, triple purpose. Every design decision needs to serve all three. That's a powerful constraint that could actually improve the architecture because it forces clarity and explainability. The better the platform works for your business, the better the content you create about building it, which attract more viewers. Let me probe deeper on the technical vision. There are a few other tools and techniques that I haven't mentioned. So I'm going to be using Claude Code exclusively for this project, not GitHub Copilot, just FYI. The main one on the Fabric side that I want to explore is the Ontology. So this is a brand new Fabric item that I think there's going to be a huge amount of development in this area. The Ontology allows businesses to define a semantic layer for their enterprise. So you define entities, you define relationships between entities, and then you bind the entities to tables in OneLake, which is where Fabric stores its data. And this is really, really important because for the first time in the Microsoft data ecosystem, you can encode semantics without the need for a semantic model, aka a Power BI semantic model. So this unlocks a lot of possibilities in my head anyway, because it frees up the need to use Power BI. Because if you think about what Power BI gives us, it gives us encoding of business rules, something to create calculations with, the ability to create visuals and reports and dashboards. Now, it does a lot of other things outside of those, but I would say those are the main three things. And yes, there's going to be more advanced features that Power BI can offer enterprises like row level security, column level security, but not every organization is probably going to use those features. Mine certainly isn't for what I need to do it for. So as well as like the backend data platform, I'm not just building a data platform for data platform's sake. The focus is on optimizing my business, not on just building a data platform. So I want to focus a lot on the ontology because I think the ontology is going to dictate the architecture quite a lot. I don't think this is just a new Fabric item. I think it's going to shift how people approach architectural decision making. And so I want to treat it like that. Another thing I'll add is for my business, in terms of, I said the core, the focus is on business optimization. There's going to be a few consumption experiences here, right? UX experiences that we need to talk about. Some of them are going to be report based. So these might be for like monthly reports, things that I want to track longitudinally over a time period where a visual is useful. The other consumption experience for these data and decisions is going to be agentic. So a large part of this is going to be building, I believe, Fabric data agents and optimizing them and testing them and making sure they can help me understand the data in my business and use them to make decisions, essentially. And again, this is going to be a really key part of the learning experience to share with my audience because in our AI community, we've been doing a lot of work around data agents. So I feel like we can share a lot of insights about how to get good results from your data agents as well. Mary, she's buzzing. The ontology insight is absolutely massive. You're not just describing a new item. Another paradigm shift. Getting a bit tired of her enthusiasm, but we'll go with it. Claude Code as exclusive AI development tool. Fabric ontology as architectural foundation. I think so. I think it just makes sense to me that the ontology should be the foundation, right? It's like the map of your entire organization. Before you bring anything into Fabric, really, it'd be good to design your ontology and agree on what are the entities, how to model these types of relationships between entities, because the ontology is much more scalable than a semantic model. If an organization has 150 semantic models, there's no real enterprise-wide picture there, especially not when we connect our ontologies to the data agent and try and reason over the enterprise. So yeah. Power BI's rethink challenged the assumption that Power BI is required for business rules, calculation of visualizations. The ontology potentially frees the architecture from Power BI dependency for many use cases. Most Fabric practitioners assume Power BI is the consumption layer. Will is questioning whether it's still true, given the ontology. For a simpler business like his, could this mean a radically simpler architecture? Report traditional visual reports for longitudinal tracking. Just a clarification on report-based consumption. There, again, with the recent advancements with AI, I think that we can develop visuals using software development practices, using JavaScript, using Python frameworks as well. And this fits into the testable framework because building visuals with JavaScript frameworks, like front end, could be a React website or Python visual dashboards as well. These fit into the greater vision for being testable. Yes, you can do some testing of UIs in Power BI, but it's a big clunky box that's tricky to do that with compared to a React component, for example, or a Python class that we can test very, very easily. We can create fixtures for them, can fit it into a wider testing strategy. So just a bit of extra context about that one. Yes, exactly. Crucial clarification. Code first, visual consumption. Building report and dashboards using software development practices, React front ends, Python visual frameworks rather than Power BI. These are more testable. Fit into the wider CI/CD and testing strategy. Data pipelines, semantics, visuals, code first, testable, and developed locally. Perfect. Emerging theme, the fully testable stack. This is exactly where I want to be going with this. So the development layer, browser-based ClickOps. So it's kind of like a from and to. Semantics, Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary. Paradigm shift. Now we're going to go deeper on the capabilities of technical vision. Let me pivot to a pretty different domain to keep our divergent thinking fresh. All right. You might be able to see that it's actually the next day. So the whole planning process probably took about 8 hours in total of brainstorming, of elicitation, of trying to get everything out of my mind and onto paper or onto Markdown, essentially, but in a structured way. So I think I recorded some of the aspects. Obviously, I didn't record the whole thing. I just wanted to show you, some of the techniques. But what I can do is I can show you the output and walk through everything that I did last night and what we have as a bit of a result. So I'm just going to do Control Shift and V. The first process was this brainstorming process. Okay. So this is probably what took the longest because we went through 4 different techniques. So there were 4 different phases, as you can see on the right-hand side here. This is just like the table of contents of this Markdown file. And we can go through it each section one by one, but I just want to show you the structure of the output. So there's a bit of an overview of the session. The technique selection, and the techniques here are these 4 main phases. And as I mentioned, they're different brainstorming and like workshop idea type techniques. And they all try and probe you in slightly different ways to get you to think in different ways about the project and get that down onto paper. So in the phase 1, mind mapping, we went on a lot of different branches and just explored the problem space in quite a lot of detail. So talking about the use cases, the data sources, the audiences, the metrics and member success, digging into that, capabilities and features, business model and growth, risks and challenges, content and teaching value, architecture and phasing. And we essentially just went down these little branches, and then I'd mention something and they'd just prod and poke and go a bit deeper on that one thing if it was interesting, to try and elicit everything for a particular branch until the agent that I was working with felt that I had everything, and I personally felt that given everything that I need to give in that branch. We then moved into phase 2, which is these 6 thinking hats. So in 6 thinking hats, it's essentially a round table, or they do it one by one, but it gets you to think in different ways. So you think through facts and data, then you think through gut feel and emotion, then benefits and value, risks and caution, creativity and alternatives, process and planning. So that's the 6 thinking hats, phase 2. We then did the first principles thinking. So this one was really interesting. It essentially stripped away absolutely everything that I know about data platform design, business optimization, whatever, and saying, okay, what is what we're moving towards fundamentally needed? And the output there, and we can have a look at some of the fundamental truths that came out of that and the first principles chain. I think one of the questions was, why can't this be a spreadsheet? So they go through extremes and get you to elicit why you would need a data platform over and above a spreadsheet, right? And through that, you get some really interesting outputs. The final phase for this brainstorming phase was the morphological analysis. We looked at key parameters, critical path, key outputs and deliverables, and success metrics. So it's shifting a little bit more into from like wacky ideas to trying to narrow it down, the thinking into something actionable, which is the whole goal of this brainstorming activity. And then at the end of this document, you'll see we've got some themes emerging from the process, things that I've mentioned all throughout. And they're like, okay, we're going to jot that down as a key theme. You've been mentioning this again and again and again. We're going to make sure that is included in this breakthrough concepts, emerging themes, and prioritize next steps. So this is the document. In total, we're talking, hang on, if I go to the raw file. Yeah, so it's around 640 lines. So it's not massive, but it's a very dense piece of work. This is essentially the inputs. So I started off by telling it everything we looked at in the previous video about what the North Star is, the principles of this project that I want to try to enact, essentially, some of the priorities. This is when it talks about the technique selection. So again, just going through those 4 phases that I looked at and what that actually means in practice. Then it's kind of documenting the output of each of those phases. So in expansive exploration, we explored those 10 different branches, and it got me to think about different data sources, the use cases and decisions that I'm likely to want to make from this particular data, about the audience, about the member success metrics, about member success pyramids. So eliciting, okay, what do we actually mean by member success in our world? And also tying that to like data points. So how can it be measured essentially as well? Some of those are quite difficult concepts to measure, like how successful is someone in your community. But if the goal is impact, then being able to have some sort of data around that would be helpful so that we can do more of what's working, essentially. We've got some capabilities and features so getting a bit more concrete here about, okay, what do we want to achieve with this platform? Should be a lighthouse project. It should focus around the local development pattern, moving from browser-based to VS Code, essentially to enable AI assistance and testable architectures. So this is the really key thing. The reason why we're favoring a local development approach in this project is to have this AI assistance unlocked and the testable architectures to make everything more testable. So these two go hand in hand, right? If we want to have more AI assistance, we need to design our architectures in a way that means they're going to be easier to test at scale. Again, that testable architecture comes through as its own capability, and it's going to influence the technology candidates. So it's putting candidates there because we're not designing the solution now. We're not in the solutioning phase of BMAD, but the key requirement should be that anything you choose in your architecture should be testable, should aim for this closed loop development process that can be tested offline, essentially, or at least in your local development environment. And then we went all the way through. There's lots of business model, risks, content and teaching value, architecture. Then we got into the 6 thinking hats. So understanding a bit more about what the facts are, the emotions. So what I'm excited about with this project, what I'm nervous about with this project, the benefits and value potentially, risks and caution of the project. So the reason why I think that the BMAD method is so helpful is that, yes, we have just got this long markdown brainstorming file, but it's going to be, in my opinion, about 100 times better than if I was just to open up a Claude Code instance and say, like, let's brainstorm some ideas. And this is outside of a BMAD project I'm talking about. Some ideas for a new Fabric project. So hopefully you can see, even if we do it on plan mode, it's going to spend a bit of time talking about your ideas, but you're still not going to get an output as good as this, in my opinion. So once I had the brainstorming file, the output of that particular piece of work was this markdown file here. And the suggested next steps were to create a PRD document. So the project requirements document. So if we click on the resume or do /resume in Claude Code, you can see the 3 main sessions or context windows that I had here from last night. So we set up the project like that. So then we created the brainstorming exercise and did all of that in this one. After that, we got this output document here. And from that, I then ran create PRD, basically feeding in this brainstorming as input and said, okay, now we've done all this brainstorming, got a really good idea of the project. Now create me a PRD document for the project. So this is when we go from kind of like analysis and research to, okay, actually documenting what the requirements for this project are going to be. Okay, so the process for generating the PRD document was a lot quicker, probably 1 or 2 hours. It stepped through 11 different stages, basically each section of the output here, and just clarified certain aspects. So you can see here you've got the executive summary, what makes the project special, the classification of the project, the success criteria in terms of user success, business success, technical success, measurable outcomes, the user journeys that are going to be targeted in this platform build. And I quite like this because it's not really how we design data platforms. So it's forcing you to think through the lens of the end user. So I really like that. Then there was the project scoping phase of the PRD. So there's going to be 3 main phases. We came to the conclusion, and we can go into what those are in a minute as well. We've got a section on innovation and novel patterns because, this is pretty much a research project. Everything we're doing here is pretty novel, I would say. So understanding what those areas for innovation are going to be, understanding the market context and the validation approach as well. And then boiling all of this down into a set of functional and non-functional requirements. So through data ingestion, what are the requirements, the data transformation layer, the consumption in terms of visual reporting, data agents. We also got into a lot of conversations about experimentation engines. So I've mentioned a lot that I really want to be doing mini experiments throughout the build phase of the project. But I also want to be doing experiments once the platform's operational, right? I want this to be an experimentation engine. I want to try different ideas and see how much the impact on the business growth levers, the business impact levers that I'm going to be tracking and monitoring as well. So we talked a little bit about those requirements. There's a lot of requirements around the actual development workflow and the testing architecture, the deployment and workspace management, the business intelligence stuff as well. Non-functional things like performance, integration reliability, testability, deployment operations again, and reliability and failure handling. You can start to see how the process is going now. We're going from big ideas to refined ideas to, okay, what are the actual requirements for this project that we're about to move into? All right, so I just want to highlight before we finish this video the output of the project scoping and the phase development, because this is essentially going to dictate what the future videos look like. So the phasing approach that we agreed on throughout this whole process is to start with a bit of a research phase. As I mentioned, a lot of these techniques haven't been applied to Fabric platforms before. They're in the early days, like they're only a few months old, for example. Not all of these approaches. Some of them are just new to me. Like I know people have been playing around with like DuckDB and DBT inside Fabric, but I personally haven't. So there's going to be a bit of a research and feasibility phase just to try and understand, okay, is my vision for this project actually feasible in terms of, can I implement the development workflow that I want to? Can it be properly tested? Can it be properly deployed between deployment environments? And all these sorts of things. If the answer is no to any of those things, I want to know as soon as possible. Okay, so we can, before we really firm up our architectural design, we're going to do a bit of a research phase here. So in terms of the YouTube series, I'll probably do one video for each of these because I think it'd be a really interesting video to really dive into like the feasibility of DuckDB for what I want to do, for example, or DBT and the ontology, right? I'm making a lot of assumptions about the ontology in this video and in this project, and I need to really stress test it before we start the project as well. So there's going to be lots of kind of mini experiments over the next few probably weeks before we can build our proposed architectural design. Once we have our architectural design that's informed by this kind of like evidence-based architecture from the experiments, then we're going to agree the architecture document. It's going to cover the workspace strategy, how we're going to do deployments, technology selection, that sort of thing. I'm also going to be doing a lot of the context engineering documents or best practice documentation, depending obviously on the research. So anything I find during the research phase that I can document for Claude Code to be able to work with these assets in a better way, I'll be doing that as well. Now, the testing strategy is going to be one of the central principles of this entire build. So once we have a pretty good understanding of the architectural design, then we're going to move into a testing strategy. Okay, so we're going to be choosing our architectural elements in this project based on one of the key metrics is their testability. So I want to be doing 90% of my CI testing in a local development environment, if possible, plus 10% of testing in Fabric on, like smoke tests of live production data, essentially, because I think that's going to get us a really good outcome and give us that safety blanket. If we're leaning more into AI for development, our testing needs to go way up as well. Most of it automated, right? Build it into continuous integration pipelines. So that's what we're going to be designing the entire strategy based on our architectural approach. And for this, I'm talking about the ingestion, the transformation layer, the visualization layer, and the agentic layer as well, because through things like agent regression testing, so we've developed some pretty good techniques in our AI community for doing that as well. If we move towards more code-based visual creation, then that brings it right in the wheelhouse of our testing strategy as well. So our testing strategy is going to cover the end-to-end, right from the ingestion, the transformation, and consumption layers of the architecture. Then we're going to start a bit of a MVP, let's say. So we're just going to take a small use case and a small chunk of YouTube data and try to build the architecture from ingestion through to consumption in a testable way. And then phase 2 is going to be essentially expanding our data sets using the same vision, the same architecture. Once we've got that up and running, that's when we're going to start with the full kind of operating rhythm. So we've got all the data sets that we need onboarded, and we're able to answer a lot of the business questions that we have access to as well. Just to round up this video, I just want to bring us back to this diagram here of the BMAD method, just to kind of come full circle and just understand what we've done in the context of the BMAD workflow. So we have spent some time mostly in this brainstorming and analysis section. We didn't use the create product brief, but we used the output of our brainstorming session as our project brief for this project. Then what we did is we passed that into the create PRD skill, and we went through the phase of taking all of our research, all of our brainstorming, building them into a PRD document. Now we've got to move into the solutioning phase, where we're going to be looking at different architectural options and feasibility first. Then we're going to be designing our architecture. And then once we've got our architecture and our testing plan in place, that's when we're going to move more into the implementation side and start to frame out some epics and stories for this project, and then go into the actual build phase. So I hope that sounds interesting and exciting. Sorry, it was a bit of a long video, but I wanted to document the process here because I think this is probably one of the most important aspects of working with AI agents, to be honest. Really sitting down for hours and hours and hours and trying to document your ideas fully. Because if you don't tell the agent your plans, your ideas, the things that are important to you, then I don't think you're going to be very successful using these AI agents. And the BMAD method is a really excellent tool that I found to help you get those ideas out on paper. So hope you enjoyed that one. I'll see you in the next video where we'll start doing some architectural experiments and trying to reduce the risk of this project from a technological perspective and understanding how we can potentially or not use a lot of these tools going forward. So I'll see you in the next one.